Hi, welcome to Artists in Residences, the Westport Library's virtual artist series. I'm Carol Erger-Fass, and I'm the exhibit curator at the library. Today, Migs Burrows talks with Deborah Howland Murray. She's a portrait artist. Deborah's media of choice is pastel, which can be vibrant and bold, or also soft and diffused. She works on sanded paper, and instead of smudging colors like you might think with pastel, she layers color over color to get an illusion of tremendous depth. For her black and white portraits, Deborah uses charcoal and graphite, which adds drama, and also, just by way of the higher contrast, allows the viewer to sort of focus more directly on the actual subject. So let's join Deborah and Migs in her studio, where she'll share with us her process on how she goes through capturing all the different personalities in her portraits.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. Thanks to the library, again, for this series, this great series, allowing me to participate in this. I get to invade and intrude on artists in their quiet time. And you know, something you can't do you can't do at any parties now, but in the old days, you know, you just couldn't corner somebody and say, tell me how you do your work and how long does it take you and what's it like to work with pastels, but now I can. So welcome, Deborah. Do you want to give a little background of how you got into portraiture? What led you studied School of Visual Arts, I understand, but from there, what was your evolution to portraits and pastels?
Circuitous. I started out doing a lot of illustration, actually. I went to School of Visual Arts for illustration, and I studied with Jim McMullen, a great illustrator, and Milt Glaser and Jack Potters, all great names. And it's a wonderful education. And took off as an illustrator. And I was an illustrator for many years. But the thing that I always loved drawing was anything that was animate, mostly people, but animals and anything that had, you know, kind of that innate personality. So then I took a break from art for a while, and I actually went back to school and became a diversity educator for a number of years. And when I came back to art, I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and that was to draw or paint people. And I've also done actually a lot of horses because I ride horses and was an entree into that. So.
Just curious, what's a diversity educator?
So I worked for an organization called the National Conference for Community and Justice, and was at a time when people were really starting to understand that multiculturalism was important, and we dealt with all the isms. So sexual orientation, religious difference, and I would design and lead workshops for adults, but mostly for high school students, which I loved. It was great.
What
to bring it together.
On your website, there's a statement that style, or I think you said you learned this at School of Visual Arts, style comes from within. Mm-hmm. You want to explain that a little bit better? Not better, elaborate.
Elaborate, right. School of Visual Arts was founded on the principle that there were a lot of illustrators out there and artists who were sort of finding a way to draw or paint and imposing that on everything. And many of the 1950s and 1960s illustrators were like that. And visual arts is based on, and it really resonated with me, on the fact that you are who you are, and it's letting that come out through the art without anything kind of imposed and gimmicky. That's about the best way I can explain it. Yeah.
Right. So you're not looking for to adopt, you know, a Milton Glaser look or right. Any of those people. You know, you're just. I don't know. How do you find that though? Is that just from just doing it over and over and over? I mean, where do you find that? Where do you look within to get that style?
I think it has a lot to do with some level of self-awareness, actually, and what you know you really value, and you look at a subject and you know what it is that you want to have come forward from the subject. And one of the things that Milt Glaser had us do was to do a number of exercises, some of which I can't remember now, of course, because it's been a while. But the idea was to figure out what it is that you absolutely couldn't leave out, that seemed to be there. And it might not be something obvious. It might be something very subtle, but that you absolutely couldn't leave out of your work, that it just kept appearing because it was so integral to who you are. So,
And
yeah.
and when did you start with traditional media like painting and I mean paint and pencil and all that kind of thing? And just curious how you gravitated to pastel, which to my very limited brain always was, from grade school or whatever, is that chalky medium that just smudges and it's dusty and smudgy, and we'll see your work in a little while and see how wonderful and articulate it is. But that the impression is some people as pastels just being.
Yeah. I haven't done a lot of painting. I do watercolors kind of on my own when I'm traveling or something, and I haven't done a lot of painting actually, and I don't paint now, and I'm a little bit drawn to starting, but it was such a pragmatic decision to go to pastel. I was the mother of 2 very small children and renting a house, and I could not see trying to do all that setup and clean up and having that stuff around with 2 little girls that were going to get into it. And I also really love the look of pastel. I love drawings. I just gravitate towards the drawings of all the great masters, even more than their paintings. And I grew to really, really love pastel. And it is that chalky, dusty stuff. And I love to get dirty. So I'm often walking around with, smudges all over my face.
Maybe that's part of the fun. But we should take a look before, I'm going to do a screen share thing here and see if that works. And it's good that we're looking at you, because this starts with your self-portrait, which is, again, as I said, this sort of defies, to me, the common perception of pastel, again, as being maybe not so precise and whatnot. I mean, it looks, I know this is part of the artistry, but, you can see like every hair on your head. It just, it's so finely, I'm sure that takes a lot of experience doing that, but.
I love textures. One of the things that helps with that is having a lot of variation in the pastels. And actually, I think if you double click on this, that you can see.
Oh, okay. There we go.
There you go. But I have very, very soft pastels and some that are in the middle. And then I have some that are quite hard. And I can, using a sandpaper sharpener, I can get them fairly pointed and I can get in there. I even have pastel pencils. So those little wispy things are usually done with a hard pastel or a pastel pencil, which is also quite hard. So
now, sanded paper, is that something you buy, or do you sand it? Do you take paper and you kind of roughen it up? Is that what that means?
No, you can buy it. There are a number of good brands out there, and you can buy it in different values of roughness. So this is probably on a 6, which is a little rougher than center. And
why is that good?
I have made my own where you apply pumice over paper, but I'm not that enterprising often. so
now, it's there, so I have to mention it. It says Widow Selfie. So when did that happen?
This it happened a little over 2 years ago, and we'll see in the next one, in the next piece, that it's a portrait of myself and my husband, David. And in that portrait, he's already sick. It's actually a couple of months before he died. But this portrait, and it's very, that was a great, really a great day, a lovely day. We're at the Black Rock Farmers Market, and he was relatively comfortable at that point. And there was a lot of really happy times in the 5 months that he was sick. But afterwards, one night I was just really kind of going crazy, and I started just with my very old iPhone taking pictures, and that's where the widow selfie came from. It really was from a selfie that I took one night, just playing around with different light, and it was not a happy time.
No, well, it's such an elegant portrait. I mean, it's obviously, it must be, I can't imagine having the presence of mind, maybe that you had to do it, but to do that during that time, but it certainly makes a strong statement.
Yeah.
I'll see this.
Yeah, I think working at my easel really got me through, actually.
Did it?
Yeah.
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 So,
yeah.
Here, is this somebody you know, or is this a commission?
This is my daughter-in-law,
Oh, okay.
And in there is my now 4-year-old grandson, Silas.
In there. And where?
Probably the calmest and quietest he ever was.
Where is he? In the drawer in that cabinet in the back? No.
Yeah. Lovely big round belly.
Now, do your models sit, or you take photos, or both, or?
A good question. It's wonderful when somebody can sit for you, but it's not often when somebody can sit for you. So I do take photos. With this, for instance, I was able to do some sketches with Megan sitting there, but I also photographed it and then worked from that. So when you work from photos, you have to be really careful, though, because it can skew the light and it can also skew the foreshortening. So you just have to learn to compensate for that.
Okay, here we go.
So
India.
good.
So you want to talk about your experience in India?
I sure do. It's I love it so much. My daughter-in-law, who we just saw a number of years after she was in India, and she was pregnant with Silas. But my daughter-in-law and my son went to India for a year, and she's a teacher, and she was teaching at this little school, and they wanted me to visit, and I said, I don't want to just visit, I want to work if I go. And so they arranged for me to teach art, and that was the first year, and then there was the second year that I went back, and the third year, and I'll go back as soon as I can. I just haven't been able to. But so these are 3 kids, and this was a very special day for them. That's why they were so hamming it up and excited, because the school had the first ever presentation that they invited parents to, and the kids showed off what they were doing, and it was really quite lovely. And it's a little bilingual school, so the kids are not just taking English, but learning in English and in their native Tamil. And it's for the poorest of the poor kids in a very poor area. And they're just precious. They're just so precious.
Wow.
I love it.
And what was the age range of the kids you were teaching?
I actually taught, the first year I taught first, they call them standards, first standard through 8th standard. And the second and third years, I actually also did some work with what they call the creche, which is the preschool and kindergarten. So, and I was ostensibly there as an art teacher, and I did teach art. I also did a lot with literature, combining it with the art, and a lot of stuff around conflict transformation. I have some photos I can show about that in a little while. This is a commission.
Okay.
Yep. And What's interesting
Animals.
about this is I think the next one is her sister, and they have such incredibly different
Oh
personalities.
yeah, look at that. Yeah.
I tried to capture that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know why I'm fascinated by the hair. I always know when I see paintings in galleries and there's hair and you get up close and it's like, well, then there's sort of no hair. I mean, it's not no strands, but
Mhm.
beautifully how it's conveyed so beautifully. Um,
This also a commission, a little 2-year-old. That was very hard. It was hard to get a photograph of her even
oh,
because she just was nonstop and she was fascinated with the camera. So she just kept walking up to me and trying to grab the camera. So we had to do 2 different photo shoots to finally get something that was usable.
yeah, I would imagine children are extra difficult.
They are.
No, that's
This is my granddaughter actually at my son's wedding.
now I love the technique and and some people may not know and say, oh, it's unfinished or why does it end? I particularly like that
Hmm.
because it emphasizes that it emphasizes the magic of what your medium does to me because it's not pretending,
Hmm.
anyway, you
Yeah.
explain it.
Yeah, and it can be, yeah, pastel can be so diffuse, and it allows you to create that going gradually from the focal point. So yeah, I like that too. But it's actually quite controversial, I found out. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I'm much less trained than a lot of people. I didn't go to visual arts for 4 years. I went for 2 years, and I was a non-matriculated student. And I just picked up pastels and started working with them. And so you can, in exhibitions, some say you have to have 70% of the paper covered, some
Oh,
it's
really?
75, some it's
Well, first
think
of all, this it
uh,
creates its beautiful edges, boundaries and edges, and I don't know. I particularly like it, but yeah, I didn't know that there was actually rules to like,
I didn't either. I found out.
you know. I mean, when I gave an online thing about my art, and I said, "Does everyone know the one rule of art?" As a joke, and nobody did, and I said, "It's that there are no rules. That's the one rule of art. There's no rules, but apparently there are."
Yeah. When I was studying with Jim McMullen, it was in some ways a terrifying experience. Put up, it started with like about 40 people coming the first night with their portfolios. And then by the next week, there were 20, and the next week, there were 15, and that's about where we stayed. But you'd put your work up on a wall, and then we'd sit in a U and we'd critique it. And so he was comparing my work to someone else's work one day, and luckily that particular time I wasn't on the downside of his critique, I was on the upside. So he said that the thing that he loved about my work was that because I didn't know the rules, I broke all the rules. So
Yeah, well, there you go.
yeah,
That's great.
yeah. This also was a commission, beautiful, and
Hmm.
really gorgeous.
Yeah.
And this was one where I actually did make my own paper.
Oh, you did?
I
Okay.
did sand it myself. Yeah.
Um, is there anything else you want me to? I mean, I can keep going through here. That's another from India, right? I
Yeah.
guess.
They're just India.
Hmm.
No, later on there are some that are black and white, but it's up to you.
Yeah. No, let's go take a look. Let's see.
You have to
Portfolio.
go to the yeah.
Yeah, black and white, and then is this the guy from South Norwalk? Is this the
Yeah, I think that's where he's from. He drives a zebra
Zebra VW bus?
W microbus. Yes.
So did you actually pin him down
Yeah,
and
he
take a
was at
picture?
Silvermine modeling. So these are
Wow.
sketches. These are
Okay.
about 4-hour sketches, whereas some of those portraits are more like, by the time I photograph and do studies, are about 3 weeks. But
Mm-hmm.
this is Fridays at Silvermine. They have an open model session. You just bring your stuff and do what you want. This is also.
Mm.
So, and these are charcoal.
Oh, I love it. So, and using white, I mean, it's using just black and white, a little light white
Mhm.
for the highlights?
Yeah, this is like this is on a light gray paper, and then some white highlights and black, and there might be graphite in there too. I tend to use I love it actually. I use powdered graphite and powdered charcoal often, and then I just take these foam applicators, little wedges of foam, and paint
Uh,
on there with them. So
do you use your fingers at all? Are you tempted to like touch the,
I do once in a while, but not
it's
often. I just tend to like to layer and not smudge. I don't know. Smudging seems like cheating to me. This is the same granddaughter who was the flower girl, but when she was almost 2. That's graphite.
Oh yeah. Wow. So this is just graphite, meaning a pencil, like a.
Yeah, yeah. And this was before I was using the powdered graphite, so they really are just pencils. Yeah.
Wow, beautiful. Now, do you have to know horse anatomy to? I mean, you obviously do, but is it from the? Do you? Is it from the inside? I'm fascinated by anatomy because I never
Mhm.
studied it, but from the inside out, or you're just aware of the shapes and textures and ripples in a.
I think it really helps to know. I think
Yeah.
it's so hard in something like this to know. And this is a horse I rode in India, who my son saw me ride her one day, and he said, "Mom, are you sure you want to get on her again?" I loved her, but she was 4 and crazy. But it's hard to know what's bone and what's vein, and
Mm.
so it really does help to know horse anatomy or any anatomy when you're drawing an animate subject like that.
But the
Okay,
signal's
so
better
now
here.
I'm gonna be
Yeah.
kind of close. But anyway, this is what it got, that window light coming in. But
Yeah. And you say you like drawing hands. I mean, some artists hate it, and you can even tell in some artists' work, they deliberately, hands are in pockets, hands are behind their back, hands
I
are out
know
of the frame. I mean, they'll do anything not to draw hands. Why? What's the problem? I mean, hands are just another shape. Why do
they
people?
are, they're difficult, they're complicated. But if you draw um, the basic um, shadows first, your darkest shadows first,
Mhm.
you'll immediately start to get, with that play of light and shadow, you'll immediately start to get the form. So that's how I was taught. It's a very painterly way to draw, although pastels are considered paintings because it's just dry paint, really.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, that's something else I've learned, is that I should be calling my pastels paintings and
Oh, that's
not matting
interesting.
them.
Yeah, I never thought. Yeah, so pastels. What are they made out of? I mean, are
It's
they
really I guess it's really the same powders as you
just?
make paint from,
Oh,
and
it's
then
it's just pigment. Okay.
yeah. So and a base, but anyway, yeah, I do like they're hard to draw. I
Hmm.
mean, I think they're very hard to draw, but I like them because I think they're very expressive. So yeah.
Okay, we only have we probably have with some of those edits, maybe we have 5 minutes left, but I wanted to go back to your to this process page just because we saw the portrait you did of this young girl. So you do, it shows you starting with a photograph, and then what do you, and I know the color of her shirt's changed. What do you filter out or in when you're when you look at a
Uh,
photograph, what do you, what do you get from it that prompts
right.
you?
Okay. Well, I took these photographs myself, and I deliberately, I tried a number of things, but she's very reserved. At least she was around me. But clearly she's quite different from her sister. And so I liked the pose a lot. It was thoughtful, and the fact that she was in this kind of very tranquil setting, as opposed to her sister, who was in the bright sun with the dog, and she seems, she's very bouncy and extroverted. So I didn't like pink because I thought it stood out too much. It would make it too much about the shirt and less about Anastasia, which is her name. And so from there, I did the black and white study, as I just showed with the piece of David. And from there, what I've shown is stages. So the topmost of those kind of cascading drawings is 1 or 2 days into it, and you can see there's not much detail. There's again, really trying to get the lights and the darks and the basic proportions, but not much detail. And then the next one is probably somewhere around day 5, or probably around 4 or 5. And now I've started to really define the darkest areas, the lightest areas. I've changed the shape of the head a bit, and I'm starting to get more of the detail in. If you could see these bigger, you would see that. And then the next one is, I think it's day 7, and it's still far from the finished product, where I really brought up the colors and added a lot of detail. But it's all a process of refining those shapes of light and dark, and then you can start to add things like, lashes and more texture in the hair and things like that. I also took out the print in the pants because it was distracting.
Oh yeah, I noticed that.
And
well, we have a few minutes left, but we didn't have time to get in depth. But your website is Deb Howland Murray Portraits.com, DEB. Deb Howland Murray Portraits.com. And there's this great thing. I don't know if does the menu drop down on your screen? Can you see the drop down menu? Okay. So there's 19 projects for COVID-19. They're great. They're great projects for anybody just now or after this is all over, but very cool projects to do at home, fun things, and that anyone can do. And I encourage you to look there. And
yeah, if anybody wants a class based on those, I'd love to do that, even if we do it over Zoom. So just get hold of me.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, Deborah. This is terrific. You're a very super talented artist, and you're the first portrait artist we've talked to. And
great.
So you're the best portrait artist we've talked to.
Let's just keep it that way.
Yeah, no, I think that would stand anyway. So I'll hand it back to Carol, and we'll say goodbye. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you. This has been wonderful.
And thank you. It's always so interesting to see the process at work. And enjoyed that. Okay. To see more of the library's online offerings, including other artists in residences videos and all of our digital content, check out westportlibrary.org. And thanks, and hope to be able to see you at the library soon.